Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Demystifying Money. I am joined today by Jen Gulbrand. She is the founder of Webreathes Wellness in Walpole, Massachusetts. She's also an author, speaker, podcaster, coach, and healer. And she basically helps hold space for all of us businesswomen, entrepreneurs, people out there who are trying to do a lot of different things in our lives and maybe don't necessarily feel that sense of belonging or community. And I think that she's helping fill that gap in my town and also with a lot of people in our area. So I wanted to have her on today to talk to her about running a heart-centered business and how she thinks that, creating those connections and helping people feel um, kind of a sense of community in a very disconnected world can help people all of us, succeed and help more people. So thank you, Jen, so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Misty.
So I know you, but can you tell the listeners a little bit more about your particular career path and how you ended up creating this space? Really, that probably was just a vision at one point, because there's no blueprint for this type of business. So tell us kind of how you got your start and how you've ended up running what you're doing today.
Absolutely. So I like to call myself a corporate dropout gone goddess, just for fun. But basically, I spent 35 years in the corporate world leading health and wellness businesses. The last 21 of years of that sort of experience, I had my own business right here in Walpole. It was a sales training company in the pharmaceutical or life sciences space. So I basically supported sales teams, right, with helping them sort of break down the science behind the drugs that they were being asked to promote. So that was 21 years of my life. It fed my family. It didn't so much feed my soul. And I think this is a really important sort of point to make. We tend to, grow up and go to college and get jobs. And sometimes I wonder if we stop to really look at ourselves deeply enough to understand why we're making the choices we're making about our career paths. So I did this thing and it was very successful. And I loved the people part of it. I loved growing and developing my team. I loved even just the creation of the solutions, but something felt like it was missing for me and I couldn't put my finger on it, right? And then I had this really life-changing experience where I lost a very good friend of mine to lung cancer. She was actually diagnosed at 52 with non-smoking lung cancer stage 4. It was crazy. And I always say it was like somebody just flipped the channel for me. Like I just felt differently about everything within that moment. And going through that sort of experience with her and her family, I think it was really, in some ways, an awakening for me to really look more deeply inside about what was important to me and where I wanted to be putting my energy. And that's when I made this sort of really major shift into the more of a holistic um, industry where I dove into meditation and yoga and movement and energy work. And I really started to see the importance of, or I guess the impact of those kinds of modalities
Mm-hmm.
versus this sort of trigger reaction that we have. We get sick and we take a pill, right? Or we
Mm-hmm.
take a prescription. And I wanted to understand really what was beneath that. What causes our dis-ease in our body? So those years of education really led me to this, I guess, um, realization that I wanted to create a space and a community that helped other people to look more deeply within themselves and to find ways to balance and align their lives, um, from within, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes any sense. So
No,
that's when
it does.
I built this community and I built this center, and it's the story goes from there.
I think the community and the center, I do think that it's it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe they feel like maybe they left a corporate environment where maybe they weren't happy or they didn't like it, but there were people around. There
Yeah.
were, maybe that's where I made a lot of friends when I first moved to Boston. It's where I met a lot of people. And I think even now, especially with people working remotely or people working on their own, there's, there's sometimes this feeling of I'm on my own now. I've got to do everything on my own. And it can be stressful, and it
Yeah,
can be lonely. And I
very.
think loneliness is something that a lot of people are feeling. So when you think about, the people who you bring together who do this type of work that I would say most everyone could benefit from, how do you help them when you have them coming to your community if maybe they don't know how to market their business so well? Maybe they just know how to do what they do, but
Right.
they're not super confident in the business side.
That's a really interesting point because when I set out to do this originally, which was, gosh, that was 2016, I was kind of focused at that time on supporting women in business.
Mhm,
That's shifted over time
mhm,
to, opening up what we do for all people of regardless of how they identify. But at the time that I started, made this shift from sort of that life sciences world to this more holistic space, I was focused on taking the things that I had learned as a woman in business
mhm,
and applying them to support these other women who were either leaving corporate, wanting to start something new,
mhm,
focused on heart-centered businesses where they're trying to, be in service to the world. Many of them did not have that business experience. They didn't have that business skill. So I was like, wow, I can take some of the things that I have developed and learned and share them with this audience. And I mean, simple things like, how do you brand yourself?
mhm,
What is your, who's your ideal client? And how do you reach them? And most importantly, how do you show up authentically as you and not the other 10 financial planners out there, right? Because people want to work with you as an individual, as a person. And
mhm,
so branding around that is really important. And so I did just sort of naturally start to help individual women to build their brands and to
mhm,
build their businesses. So that's one aspect of your question. The other piece is this idea of community. I think one of the things that led me to create this kind of combination center and community is I was seeing even pre-pandemic how isolated people were feeling. It's much worse now, right?
mhm,
But isolated, this lack of connection, and let's face it, like we all as humans, we have this need to feel like we belong.
mhm.
That's sort of what prevents us from sometimes showing up as ourselves because we
Yeah.
might we fear maybe not being misjudged or misunderstood
Mhm,
or belonging. So I really wanted to create a community where everyone felt welcome. And I know we hear this a lot, right? In the networking groups. There's so many networking groups and they're all wonderful. But when I set out to do this in 2016, I wanted a community where people could show up authentically as themselves and feel accepted and feel welcomed. And I have to tell, I'm getting goosebumps right now because I can think of so many stories
mhm,
over the last 9 years of people who would come and didn't feel like they belonged right away or felt awkward, and how this like world opened up for them, and how I was able to watch them transform, to come into themselves, to gain confidence, to feel comfortable connecting with other women who just wanted the same thing for
mhm,
them, which is to see them rise and see them succeed. And I mean, if somebody asked me, what are you most proud of?
mhm,
Really, like being able to create and hold a space like that where it was genuinely creating that kind of vibe where everyone could come in here and be like, wow, I feel good here. Like I feel
yeah.
the energy of the people and I feel the love. That's what we did here. And
Mhm,
all I did is really set the tone and create the container, but the
mhm.
people who come here get that. They get that that's the vibe, and they
Yeah.
carry it forward. And I love that because we all need to have a place like that.
Yeah, and I think that when it's easy to find a community or people, who are on, I would say, a low vibrational or unhappy or commiserating. That
Yeah.
seems to be everywhere. Where if you're actually looking to grow your business, or you're proud of yourself, or you have good things going on, a lot of us tend to feel like we need to dull that down to not upset anyone or offend anyone, or people have it work. So I think there's really not that many spaces for entrepreneurs, men or women, where they
Right.
can really feel like I am crushing it and other people are going to be proud of me or excited for me. That's very rare.
It's so rare and it's so important, right? And that's just because we're programmed, especially women. We're
Hmm.
programmed to like dim ourselves down, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and you're right. Like now, that's why I say our centers, oh, we welcome
Yeah.
everyone. At the time, that's where we started, but I just wanted to share it, and that's why we
Mhm.
expanded to the We Breathe Wellness space and center. But yeah, like why did we do that? Why do we feel like we have to, you know, kind of dim our light so that we don't upset anyone? It's so crazy because in our space, in our community, we want everyone it's like all boats rise, right?
Mhm.
We want everyone to do well. And the other thing that's sort of different about what we do is many networking groups, I know you know this, you can have like one person in each
Mhm.
space, right? Like one realtor, one financial planner, one coach, right? And I understand that. And I'm not being negative at all
Yeah.
about the model. But here, what I wanted to emphasize is that it's community over competition.
Mhm.
When you get three financial planners in a room or in a meeting or three coaches in a space, you're all learning from each
Yeah.
other, right? Because
Mhm.
we all are going to resonate with different people. Different
Yeah.
clients are going to choose us because they're going to resonate with our energy. So why not have a collective,
Yeah.
opportunity, because that is just I think it's just less limiting,
I agree.
community over competition. And
Yeah,
I
and I think that is the basis of a lot of networking groups. I was at an event last night where there was another financial advisor there, and somebody said to me, "Don't worry, she's in the South Shore." And I was like, "Why would I worry? Like I can help all of Massachusetts." Or
exactly,
and it didn't but I realized that is okay, that is probably part of the selling point to say you're the only one here who
of
does
course,
this. So everyone will then, and I don't expect everyone to refer people to me anyway, just because they have to. That's so strange. But I do feel like that is the way most networking groups are, where actually I've networked with a lot of other advisors who work with different people than I do, different income so many different things where knowing more of other people can help you help people that maybe aren't your ideal person
it gives you somebody
gets
to
gets
refer
help.
to, right? When they're not your ideal client. No,
Yeah,
I
so I like that idea.
Yeah, it's very important, and I think the people who have come here and who like buy into that, because
Mhm,
99.9% of the people do, they see and they experience why it's just such a more
mhm,
high vibrational way to be,
mhm.
and it helps everybody. We
Yeah.
all learn and grow and evolve. That's the whole point, right? We
So
can't all
when
know how to do everything perfectly.
right, no, and I don't think any I think we kind of pretend like we do or we feel like we're supposed to, and then it's nice to actually meet other people who are truly trying to figure out all of the I mean, navigate whatever business environment they're in. But I do think that there has been a bit more, at least what I've seen, acceptance
Yeah.
of certain, like you mentioned, some of these businesses, some that are more in the taking care of yourself and your energy and your because I think we are all seeing, and maybe it was from the pandemic or whatever, that we only have so much to give and maybe like our health is important and mental
Yeah.
health becoming more of a mainstream news topic is making people think about what they're doing every day, how they feel about it. And so I think that it is an interesting time to be in this space for those people. And even being a financial planner who talks about how people are feeling and thinking versus performance and metrics, which we also talk about, but it's not really why people come to me or what they really care about. So how would you say the outlook is for people who are in maybe a business where they are serving others or helping others feel better, whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually? What do you think the outlook is for people who maybe do want to look at that for a career?
Oh, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I think the whole health and well-being space is only going to get bigger
Hmm.
because because of the things you're saying. We just came out of a pandemic. Mental health is a serious issue.
Mhm.
It was before, now it's more in the limelight, right?
Mhm.
Because so many people are suffering with depression and anxiety and even suicide ideation,
Mhm.
which is why I formed my nonprofit, particularly to focus on improving mental health,
Mhm.
access to resources for people, but that's a side note. But
Mhm.
yes, so I feel like the space alone, I mean, the space itself is only going to grow. People don't want to be taking antidepressants.
Mhm.
People don't want to be taking a pill to feel better, when
Mhm.
in reality, because they're understanding that there's a root cause to why they don't feel well. There's right. And
Mhm.
and this is why I do all the trauma work that I do, because so much of us have these experiences and we shove them down, and then they become dis-ease in our bodies.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of more understanding now about how we want to feel the stuff that we've experienced so that we can move it and heal it versus just sticking it in a box somewhere, in
Mhm.
our mind and in our body. So I think the space itself is only going to grow. One of the points that I think what I'd like to make is for people in these fields that we are just talking about. So anyone who's in a field of caretaking for others, right? You're helping people manage your money. Somebody's helping, you know, heal, helping with energy work or
Mhm.
coaching someone, or nurses or
Mhm.
teachers. I mean, firefighters, think of them, all of these people, right, who are
Mhm.
caring for others. It's such a beautiful line of work to be doing this heart-centered work. The message that I have for those people is to please remember to stop and restore and recharge yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're going to burn out and you're going to get depleted and you're not going to be able to support all these people because
Mhm.
you're going to be struggling with many of the same challenges, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I built this whole online course library called Resilience, and it's all around this concept of we all need to stop and recharge ourselves. We're not here to just endure,
Right.
because when we do that, we're going to hit a wall.
Mhm.
So if we can give ourselves permission to, you know, have a morning routine, get outside and walk in during the day, take 5 minutes to meditate or whatever it is that works for you so that you can continue doing the work that you do while still taking care of yourself. This idea of putting your mask on first has a whole nother meaning now, but
Yeah.
real, right?
Yeah.
Like, you really, if you're not caring for your own self and loving your own self, you can't continue to give out to others.
And I think that's something that comes up a lot. I work with a lot of people who end up, for one reason or another, becoming a caregiver, maybe unexpectedly, or they're in a business where they are giving a lot and they're maybe absorbing a lot of people's
Gee,
stress,
those low
frustration,
vibes, as you say.
ailments. Yes. And so that can be something that I think that people who have the best intentions can eventually find themselves burnt out. Maybe they, maybe financially they can't afford to be in the business they're in anymore because they've never raised their prices, or or they're just so overwhelmed and done that, unfortunately, where you mentioned, like the businesses that, feed the family and don't feed your soul, sometimes you can leave those at the door.
Yes.
And so I think that, there's a lot to be said for the pros and cons of both. So how would you say, for somebody who maybe is in a caregiving business where they're starting to feel um like there's less and less to give,
Mm.
how can they, because everyone's going to expect them to show up a certain way
Oh, yeah.
and be there to help them and to,
Oh,
to have, 100% to give all the time. How do you, with, you mentioned your library, your course library, how can those people even, what does it take besides the, laying on the floor or the heart attack or the headache or something? How can people recognize that they're on that path to potentially burning out or,
well,
not before
stress
it happens?
Yeah, stress shows up in all of us in really different ways, right? I mean, typically people will start to notice they're not sleeping well, or they have, their appetites changed, or they're getting headaches
Mhm.
all the time, right? Or they have, physical tension. Like these are all our body's way of telling us to pay attention.
Mhm.
It's so funny. We live in this world where we think I mean, we have these beautiful brains, right? And they're so fabulous, but many of us kind of live from our neck up. So everything we're thinking, strategizing, problem solving, we kind of get disembodied and disconnected from our body. Yet our body holds all this knowledge
Mhm.
about what it's feeling and what it's experiencing. So that's why we start to get these warning signals. Why do I keep having migraines? Why can't I sleep at night? Right? Why am I having chest pain?
Mhm.
Why can't I take a deep breath? These are all our body's way of saying, hey, stop and listen to me. So that and that we tend to ignore that stuff, right? Which is why we get sick. And
Mhm.
then we're out of commission for a while.
Yeah.
So I think learning to recognize your own body's signs and symptoms would be my first sort of thought there in
Mhm.
terms of responding to that. And then how you manage that is also very unique to the individual.
Mhm.
So like in my coursework, I talk about first, how do you recognize the stress and how it's showing up? What works for you? Have you tried breath work? Have you tried meditation? How about just getting out in nature and walking or changing your diet? Or how about scheduling time in your day to just pause and be still and kind of, learn how to self-regulate because we can just go spiraling off into crazy land, right?
I think that's important to mention that it could be breath work, it could be changing your nighttime routine or your morning routine or your like
Ooh,
because the people I talk to have gotten to the point where they just think they need to burn everything to the ground and
right.
start over,
Yeah.
not thinking
Or flight response.
tiny changes,
Yes,
little
yes.
things you might be able to do, which I find interesting. I just read a book called Breath by James Nestor. I'm not sure if you've read that. It's really fascinating about the breathing issues that this man had and why our heads are all of these things about that's changed about us physically over time, like
Right?
centuries. And it's really fascinating because it's like, even if you can't meditate or you're not a yoga person, all of us breathe.
Of
And
course.
even just breathing a little bit differently every day or focusing on it was just really fascinating to
Breath
kind
work.
of read that
Oh, yeah.
and think about like how often do people teach us how to breathe or think
Well,
about
well, let me tell you something. Well, first of all, I named my entire center We Breathe Wellness, and this is why,
it.
because we have this tool. Every individual has this
Mhm.
tool, and most of us don't know how to use it.
Right.
I coach people, 98% of the people that come to me as a coaching client, I have to teach them how to breathe all over again.
Yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
it
Right?
is.
Because we're breathing from our chest because,
Mhm.
right? And it feels labored. But really, I literally wind it all back and teach them how to breathe from their abdomen up into their chest. And there's so many different breath patterns and
Mhm.
things that we can teach people. It takes 5 minutes
Yeah.
to completely shift your central nervous system with your breath.
It's super fascinating, I
It's
think.
fascinating. The number one thing that I teach every client because they have control. Their body has the control.
Mhm.
Even if they can't leave their office and they can't take a walk or they can't go to a yoga class, they
Mhm.
can shift everything in 5 minutes by
Yes.
deep intentional breathing. It's
Entrepreneurs, parents, everybody.
one.
Sometimes you can't just walk away. You can't
I
leave,
know.
do anything.
So
And
true.
but you can, you're right, you're breathing. I think it was just fascinating because I do think that there is, and I like all of the different things that I'm learning about ways to, improve my mental to kind of become more centered. You know, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily to be a very centered sometimes person because I'm very good at building that. I think I get it's stuck in my head occasionally. And I feel like all of these things that I've learned over the past few years have been very helpful to actually spend some time reflecting on the thoughts that are going on in my head all the time. But I do think that it's something that some people consider a little too out
Little too out
there.
there. Yeah. No, that's
So
why the
how do
brain.
we get past that? Because this is helpful. This is really helpful stuff. All of the the things that you're teaching people, even the courses, even the library that you've created, these are things that people can do. These are not
Oh,
huge and financial investments that you need to make. You don't need to have a Pilates reformer. You just need to be open to learning something different. So,
and be open to trying different things to see what responds for you.
mhm,
What helps me is maybe not going to help the other person. But I think the biggest thing to understand, and that's why breath work is so effective, is that we need to learn how to get out of our heads and into our bodies.
mhm,
We literally are walking around like this. We are
yes,
so disconnected. And so when we can, like, breath work is simply, it's a somatic practice.
mhm,
Somatics means body-based.
mhm,
So breath work is a form of somatic practice because you're connecting now. You're not thinking the thought, you're thinking about your breath,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Somatics is movement. It's taking a yoga class, it's taking a walk, it's moving your body instead of just thinking about the thoughts. And I think that's why psychology has changed so much, because we spent all these years thinking that we talk therapy was going to solve all of our issues,
mhm,
when in reality it's maybe 20% of it,
yeah,
because so much of it's stored in our body. So that's why you're seeing and learning and hearing so much more now about somatic therapy and practices and EMDR and
mhm,
all these ways that we can connect our minds and our bodies, because we are whole beings, right? We're not just a brain.
yeah. No, and I think that's true. And I think a lot of times we focus on our brain and what we learn and everything that, our expensive educations, all of these things that we should be doing and that we've worked so hard for. But you mentioned, and I had another guest on recently talking about trauma and that could even be health issues. That could be things that have happened to us in our lives that we again are just kind of not really processing or working through. And then we get to, a point where, we don't know how to handle everything that's coming our way. So when you talk to people, I mean, I think in trauma is it's an interesting term, and some people are comfortable talking about it, and other people feel like that means someone hurt you or you were, abuse. And it's not necessarily the case, but I do see trauma kind of, especially in finances, sometimes it just kind of reappears
Oh,
when people have these patterns. And so how do you help people really, you mentioned the somatic work, kind of uncover that, like, no, these events, are still with you. These are certain things that maybe we need to, reassess and maybe try to work through to become more successful.
so, I mean, every client is different. Everybody's an individual, right? It's interesting, just like my business structure is sort of a combination of wellness and community, right? So is my practice. So as a coach and a healer, I combine all that, right? So I will sit with somebody and just ask questions and try to get a sense of what they're struggling with, what
Mhm,
their blocks might be. They may not even know what's keeping them stuck. So a lot of questioning and talking, and it just sort of unfolds, and over time, and we start to understand what they want. Sometimes they don't even know what they want,
mhm,
right? They just know what they don't want. So we'll work through that, and we'll understand, like, what do you think might be blocking you? We all have kind of grown up with these sort of, I call them limiting beliefs, right?
mhm,
So they're narratives or stories in our head. So the things that happen to us when we're super young, like really 0 to 7, all these kind of stories form in
mhm,
our head based on who our parents were, how they raised us, what messages
mhm,
did we receive, right? And then those create stories, and that kind of becomes our wiring in our subconscious
mhm,
brain. And very often it's those stories or those narratives that kind of keep people trapped or stuck.
mhm,
Then slap on top of that trauma, right? And like you said, there's a whole range of that.
mhm.
You don't have to get into that, but there's a
Right.
whole range of that. It's basically when you were put in a situation that your body and mind couldn't handle because it was too much to process, right? So you go into this fight or flight response because your body is sensing danger.
Mhm,
And so we don't process it. That's what basically trauma is. It's sort of an unresolved experience or wound.
mhm,
So it gets stuck in there. and it just like we have them all over us, right?
Mhm.
It's like energetic debris. And I always say it's like this big beach ball. You know, when you have a beach ball and you try to hold it under the water, you can only do that for so
Right.
long, so it's going to hit you in the face,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
Right? So, so we kind of work through all that, and what are your belief systems about yourself,
Mhm.
and how can we break through those and rewrite those narratives, slay that shame? I say
Yeah.
we all carry it. We all
We
carry.
all do, and even people who have, and even sometimes when I ask people about, like, what money was like for them growing up, even the people who had a very comfortable, happy life feel ashamed of it occasionally.
Yes, of course.
And it's interesting, so they'll be like, "Well, yeah, no, we didn't show, and I didn't have to pay for college, or I didn't have to do this," and they're like,
I know.
and it's interesting because we all have, and it's not a good or bad thing. It's just kind of like, okay, this is what shaped who you are, and that's why we need to just kind of find some common ground, especially with couples. But it is fascinating how it's not just universally like, oh, you must have been poor, or you had these, you were not privileged in this. And it's just interesting how all of us have certain things that may be holding us back that
Yeah,
we
but
just haven't
about
recognized.
every aspect of our life, but we certainly have money
Yeah.
mindset stuff. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's huge, right?
Yeah.
Did your parents raise you with this lack mentality,
Mhm.
like there was never enough? Or, we all have, there's such a wide range of stories around every aspect of our life, but I'm sure you see that a lot with,
Yeah, and it's interesting the people that have kind of done some work on it, you can tell really quickly.
yeah,
But it's rare still, it's still rare, but I think it's interesting that it's becoming more, uh, focused on in my field. I'm
yeah,
seeing, other advisors start to work on developing those skills, which is really, I think, beneficial for everybody.
yeah.
But it is kind of there's going to be some takers and some who would like to stick with the kind of the old ways. But I did want to ask a question though, because you mentioned it briefly about your nonprofit. Can you tell me a little bit more about the nonprofit work that you do and what kind of led you to create that? And also, what are some of your plans with that for the future?
Absolutely, I would love to. So the nonprofit is called We Breathe Wellbeing Soul Sanctuary. Excuse me. It's just coming up on a year old. And basically what kind of instigated that was we coming through COVID. I mean, lots of things happened with that, right? I just opened the center March 1st, the world shut down. I was like, oh, here I am with this beautiful place and nobody can come. But what I was finding through that experience were people were coming to me for, yeah, a lot of energy work and coaching work because of all the things we've talked about, the fear, the isolation, the depression, and all of those things. But what I was finding is there was particularly a large population of young emerging adults, we call them.
Mhm.
So because coming through COVID, I mean, my own daughter was in that age range. Everything sort of changed for them, right? This idea of graduating, going to college, getting a job, like it kind of shifted for a lot of young people because this sort of sense of a lack of security
Mhm.
and understanding of where the world was going, and a lot of kind of just, I'm going to be honest, self-medicating because these young adults just are, they felt very lost and scared, rightly so. And so I was seeing a lot of that younger population coming to me with parents who were just like, I don't know what to do, with my
Yeah.
20-year-old. And so it just started getting me thinking that, I mean, here we have a center and we have families who have access to us as a resource,
Mhm.
but there is a lack of therapists, there's a lack of programs. What about all the people out there who don't have access
Yeah.
to centers like this, who
Mhm.
don't have families who even know to take them for help?
Right, or who might be thinking, "Why are you so upset?
Exactly. What's
What
your
do you have for problems?" Which
even
unfortunately you hear.
or,
Yeah.
or tragically, parents are like, why did my child take his life? I didn't know anything was wrong.
Yeah.
So, like, there was this real disconnection going on.
Mhm.
And so I was just like, I don't know. I just felt like we had the space and the resources and the people who could help.
Mhm.
And so, launching a nonprofit was a whole different experience, and I'm still learning.
Mhm.
But I have a beautiful board that we've assembled, and We spent the last year doing a lot of research and focus groups with that population of
Mhm.
like 17 to 28. And we're actually about to pilot our first program next week.
Mhm.
And so we have really worked with that group to help us understand what are they experiencing, what's helping them, what resources do they need, so that we can then create programming based on their feedback. So that's been really interesting. But the nonprofit is basically about putting more programs, more resources, access,
Mhm.
improving access to anyone who needs help improving their well-being,
Yeah.
regardless of their age, their cultural background.
Mhm.
And so, yes, it's really exciting. We have had a number of fundraisers this summer. We have our big fundraiser in September, and our long-term goal is to secure enough donors that we can curate our own retreat property somewhere, maybe on the um, Westport, Fairhaven kind of area. So it's not the Cape, but it's
Mhm.
still an hour away from the city so that we can bring the people together for like 3, 4, 5 days of immersive well-being
Mhm.
experiences.
That's
So
amazing.
really excited. That's really the long-term goal, but we have
No,
a
I
way.
love that. I think that's great. And I've talked to some people who, like, when they talk to me about, things that they've enjoyed spending their money on, a lot of times some of these retreats or these are life changing. That is sometimes what comes up as the um best experience that they've invested in themselves, which is a difficult thing to do. A lot of people don't invest in just them going on, like not creating it, not
Yes.
benefiting the whole family, like,
Right.
directly. And so I think it's unique because a lot of times people will have a very, life-changing experience doing that kind of work on themselves that then turns into so many rewards for
It's
in
so true.
so many different ways, their families, their clients, themselves. So I think
That's
that's
one
such
of
a
the money,
wonderful
yeah.
idea and goal for sure.
That's those money mindset things, right? Like we don't take care of ourselves. We don't spend money on ourselves.
Right.
Like easy stuff. It's so funny. As you know, I hold space. I help a lot of people, and I too, as a caretaker, get burned out. And for the first time in 61 years, I took myself away for 5 days.
Wow.
It was life changing just to have some quiet
Mhm.
solitude, to think, to walk, to not have to be responsive. It was
Mhm.
really amazing.
Yeah.
I wrote my last blog about it. It's really important that we create space for our own, you know, opportunity to just be, to be
Mhm.
still and to really listen and to quiet that
Yeah.
mind. It really helps tremendously for people. So
No,
that's a big recommendation that I
I
have.
do, yeah, usually I approve that, and also I do think that, a lot of time we do put too much emphasis on being productive or creating something or reacting and, not realizing how we're valuable just being here. And
Being
so that kinda gets lost occasionally, so I think
yeah,
spending those time to
yeah,
reflect
yeah,
does help you.
yeah. It's like the doing energy versus the being energy. We
Yeah,
kind of both, right? We need a balance.
yeah. So if anybody's listening and wants to learn more about your work, the center or your nonprofit, how can people find you and reach out for more information?
Hey, well, there's so many ways. So the We Breathe Wellness Center is in Walpole, and that's the We Breathe Wellness Center on all of our social medias. The nonprofit is We Breathe Wellbeing Soul Sanctuary. Again, we're on Facebook. We have a website, and we have Instagram. My own personal brand is called Embody Your Essence. That's because that's the name of my book,
Mhm.
um, and that is under usually I am Jen Gulbrand on social media. And that's really the work that I'm doing as a coach, a speaker, a healer, an author, and this mission that I have of
Mhm.
helping people to be more authentic and to share their real life experiences with one another to really, be a catalyst for community.
Yeah.
So those are the three places.
Okay.
And I so appreciate the opportunity to share with you
Yeah.
and your listeners. Thank
No,
you.
thank you. And thank you for coming on the show. We will add all of those into the show notes. And I do think it's such an important thing. And if you're a business owner or you're somebody who's working for yourself, this is an important thing to consider, maybe a community or something, where you can feel like you're around like-minded people. Maybe it's not maybe if networking hasn't traditionally been for you, something like this could be interesting. And also for those people who are taking care of their employees or have other people, and you're starting to think of what can I do to better serve my employees to make sure that they're not just financially cared for, but they're also getting benefits and community and feel like they're valued as a person. I think Jen does offer a lot of, the speaking and talking to, to people who are in that place where they can, a lot of times people look to their employer for their financial education. I think also that has been where they've gotten some sense of community and belonging. I do think it will be the next place that people go for mental health and
Yeah.
wellness.
Corporate wellness is a big piece of what we offer here. And then I did mention I have my resilience whole body well-being content library,
Yeah.
which is a really easy access. It's so easy, little bits of information for anyone who's looking to just improve their own health and well-being. So those are also definitely, uh, offerings that we have here. So
Yes, no, I think there's so much available to you, whether you're a self-study, where you'd like to be with people, there's certainly some sort of solution that can help you. So thank you so much, Jen, for coming on the show and for sharing more about your community and what you've built and what you've done with your career. And if you're somebody who is thinking about taking the leap from corporate and starting a heart-centered business, or maybe you're somebody who has been, trying to make sure that your money mindset is healthy, so that you can actually continue to grow and to thrive, please head over to mistylynch.com. You can catch up with me there, listen to other episodes of the podcast, find the book, or connect with me to see if you have some space in your financial plan for maybe a 5-day vacation by yourself. I'd love to help you figure that out. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk again next week.
thanks, Misty. Take care.
Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.